Hello everybody, MistareFusion here to talk about some Final Fantasy memories. Now, for those of you who've never seen a Final Fantasy Memories video before, which is somewhat understandable because I haven't done one in almost 3 years. I have like about 7,000 more subscribers than the last time I did one. But Final Fantasy Memories is another one of the pillars of my channel where I talk about, I give an impromptu review of each of the Final Fantasy games and also talk about my own personal memories with them. To have this sort of hybrid review and nostalgia trip, and it's all a lot of fun. And I've been going through each of the Final Fantasy games since about 2012. And now I've finally reached Final Fantasy IX. Finally, Final Fantasy IX. Got enough finals in there. And it's the final game of the PlayStation trilogy, the original PlayStation trilogy. And I'll go ahead and put it out there, I have always considered this one, and still consider this one of my favorites, if not my favorite Final Fantasy games of all time. And it's certainly the one that I have some of the most interesting memories about. So let me just, since it has been a long time since I've done a Final Fantasy Memories video, let me go back and briefly recap my own history with the franchise. So I first played Final Fantasy VIII on PC. And then I got Final Fantasy VII on PC. This is all in the year 2000. Then a friend of mine in high school sold me his Super Nintendo copy of Final Fantasy II, which is actually Final Fantasy IV. And I'd become so obsessed with Final Fantasy by this point that for Christmas of 2001, I did something that I had never done before and have yet to do since. I asked for a console that was not Nintendo related. Every other console I've ever owned in my life, up until 2020, right now, has always been Nintendo. But because Final Fantasy had moved on to PlayStation and would be continuing to be released on PlayStation, I asked for a PlayStation 2. And that Christmas of 2001, I got a PlayStation 2, and I also got Final Fantasy Chronicles, Final Fantasy Anthology, Final Fantasy IX, and Final Fantasy X. So that was a lot of new Final Fantasy games to catch up on. I would go back to Chronicles later, had Final Fantasy IV, and also Chrono Trigger. Final Fantasy Anthology had 5 and 6, and of course 9 and 10 were 9 and 10. And I would be playing through those games in order. So it took me a while to get to 9. Yeah, even after I got in the game, I didn't play it for a while. But we'll get back to that in a minute, because my history with Final Fantasy IX goes back even farther than that, in a sense. After I had gotten into Final Fantasy through 8, and possibly 7 and 4 at that point, I was looking for things to satiate that Final Fantasy itch, you know? So I was in the local game store, Software Etc. That's what we had back then. So easy to say GameStop, but no, it wasn't GameStop. We didn't have GameStop. It was Software Etc. Although it became a GameStop later on, I think, maybe. Everything became a GameStop later on. Anyway, I went in one day, and up at the counter, there was, a cardboard display case with a whole bunch of these. I hope the lights aren't blocking it. All right, we're making a glare. The FF9 Uematsu's Best Selection CD. And I'd already thought, that the Final Fantasy music was fantastic, just completely amazing. So I immediately picked this up and took it to the counter, and I distinctly remember the guy at the register going, you know this isn't the game, right? And I'm like, yes, I know it's not the game. I want to get it anyway. Because this is before I got my PS2, so I knew it might have been not long before that, so I knew I'd be getting one eventually, maybe. I don't know. But this was the first Final Fantasy soundtrack I ever owned, and I listened to this for so long before I ever got to play the game at all. So I didn't know what any of these track titles meant, who any of these characters were, and I sort of had to imagine what they'd all go to. And I really sort of tie this into my freshman year of high school, because I remember we had to do a lot of reading in freshman English. And I earlier that year I'd gotten a friend to give me like an audio cassette copy of the Ocarina of Time soundtrack. And I remember listening to that soundtrack as I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And then, when we got to Romeo and Juliet, I was listening to this soundtrack, and I cannot think of a more perfect soundtrack for that. I don't know, just the older style of music, it just really perfectly fit, you know, the setting of the play. So I always to this day tie Romeo and Juliet to the music of Final Fantasy IX. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world, but I definitely do. And there were so many standout tracks, I couldn't wait to understand where they fit into the thing. Freya's theme that you hear in Burmecia, I loved that one, and actually the track immediately after that one, Tantalus' theme, that nice jaunty piano thing. I would go back to that one, Tantalus' theme, over and over and over again. So I definitely had a lot of hype built up to this game before I even got to play it a single time. I finally did get my PlayStation 2, and I dutifully went through those new games in order. So it was 5, then it was 6, and then it was 9, and then 10 after that. So, you know, if there's anything consistent about me, it's that I'm always years and years behind the curve, you know? But so I was dutiful, but I wasn't completely, you know, loyal. I played the games in order, but I couldn't help but just sort of look forward and just have a little taste of what was to come. So I played through the opening sequence of Final Fantasies 6, 9, and 10 so many times. That first trip in the Magicite armor through Narshe, I played that so many times. I played like the opening Blitzball game and stuff like that on FF10, and probably more distinct than any of the other ones, I played through the opening sequence of Final Fantasy IX. That might be my favorite opening to a Final Fantasy game, just with the theater ship and those gorgeous FMVs and the musical tracks that were all on that CD I've been listening to for like a year prior to this. It was fantastic. So I played I would play through the beginning, through the fact that it was about theater, you know, like the main character was an actor, and an actor/thief, you know, and the whole thing was they're going to this kingdom to put on a play, but it's really a front to kidnap the princess. And like they had the blustery knight who followed along after them, and the little black mage who got all caught up in the thing, and they all got crashed in the evil forest, and all that stuff. I played that so many times, and I cannot get enough of that. It just sets the stage for the game so incredibly well. There's so much humor, so much action, so much setting up of characters and story beats. It's like, I don't think any opening to any Final Fantasy game just encapsulates the experience as well as this one does. Something I found really unique about this game was just how special it stayed for a while. Like, I've loved pretty much every FF game I've ever played, but I especially always felt in the multi-disc based PlayStation titles that it's like so much of the punch was in the early sections of the game. I feel like after Disc 1, FF8 started to lose some steam, kind of the same way in FF7 as well. That's not to say that they became completely just bad after that, but there was just always something more exciting about those early missions, you know, the early parts where you're still meeting all the characters and things could turn around at any given point. And then it just sort of felt like by the second disc things had sort of stabilized, you know, and there weren't as many things happening, and you know, later on, especially in FF8. In FF8, it just feels like you get your 6 party members really quickly, and then I don't know, there just doesn't seem like there's as many places to go. FF9 really held on to that sense of wonder for a while. It's not until the end of Disc 2 that you even get all of your main party members, and also the fact that for a while, it doesn't even really seem like there are necessarily main party members. They're just people who come and go, almost like Final Fantasy IV. There is a telltale sign in the game as to who is a main character and who isn't, at least related to in terms of the gameplay mechanics. And that's because the limit breaks or special arts called trance in this game, it's represented by a bar, and only people who are part of the core 8 members of the cast have access to that. If it's somebody who's a temporary member, they don't have trance, so it's easy to tell, oh, they're not going to be sticking around forever. I'd rather that not be the case, but in terms of storytelling, there's really nothing that separates, that says, this is a hard dividing line in the first 2 discs as to who was a main character and who's not. It's just, you have various organic means for the story to introduce people into your party, and then you split off at certain ways. So obviously you have, actually my favorite one was Blank. Towards the beginning, in the evil force, he comes, he breaks away from the theater troupe just like your main character Zidane does, and joins you, but he's not with you very long before these evil plants grab him and petrify him, basically. Which has always been one of my favorite FMVs in the entire game, if not the entire franchise, and always really made me have a soft spot for that character, that he just, he shows up and he's doing the best he can, and then, this happens, it just happens. It's almost like in Sailor Moon. It's a weird counterexample. When the series starts and Usagi's hanging out with her friend Naru all the time, but she's not, one of the Sailor Senshi. So as time goes on, she sort of gets moved to the background. And it's kind of the same here, where it's like the first battle you fight, you have Zidane, your main character, in there, but the rest of your party's filled out by all the other Tantalus members. It's Senna and Marcus and Blank. And Senna's not really that important, but Marcus and Blank, even though they're not, extremely major characters in the story, they keep sort of interweaving with your story on occasion. So, Zidane finds a new family through these other people he starts traveling with and has major quest with, but you formed this bond with these other characters. And so, later on in Disc 2, I was so excited in Disc 2 when Marcus came back into your party after that, and joined up with Dagger and Steiner. I thought that was so amazing, and it made the whole thing feel so much more real. I prefer Final Fantasy games that have a larger cast, or at least have temporary characters. Final Fantasy VI did that really well, too. And again, I hate to say it, because FF8 was my first, and I love it, but Final Fantasy VIII really didn't do a good job with that, where it just felt like, oh, here are your 6 people, and they're your 6 people because we said so in the game. And, this just feels a lot more organic. And I love the characters in this game more than most other Final Fantasy games. It's so nice to have a protagonist who's not the brooding, hardcore, Cloud or Squall type character. I have nothing against those character types, but this is just such a nice breath of fresh air. Like, Zidane really carries this story really well, just by being upbeat and optimistic, and just has a natural magnetism that draws everybody in towards it. Everybody who has all these weird identity crises, which is what makes FF9 special to me. Like, this is a really, really solid through line about who you are and what's your place in the world. What does it mean to be an individual? And so many of the characters struggle with that, like Princess Garnet. She changes her name to Dagger after Zidane's knife, partly because she's on the run, but she is a sheltered princess character and is trying to make her own decisions and figure out what is really true. And it turns out that even that sheltered princess thing was a lie. She has her own deep dark secret of where she actually came from and what her powers are. Steiner's identity is all about loyalty. He's a knight. And he's really uptight, very obedient, and sees the mission before anything else. And it's great seeing him change and grow and have to question and make his own decisions and figure out what actually is right and wrong, versus always just going, the monarchy is right, whatever they tell me to do is right. And of course there's Vivi. It's such an amazing idea to take the original Black Mage concept from the first Final Fantasy and make an entire character and character type around that. Because originally it was just this sort of Jawa-based, Jawa-esque look, and even in the original Final Fantasy, when the Black Mage changed class into the Black Wizard, the hood, like the pointy hat and the hooded face was gone. He looked just like a regular person, so it wasn't necessarily innate. But in this game, a Black Mage is a specific type of being, and Vivi doesn't really find out what that means until later on, where he finds that they're actually he and everybody else are just mass-produced weapons, they're sent out to destroy things, and that really, more than anybody else, he struggles with his sense of identity. And he finds a village of defected Black Mages later, which is nice because it turns out they're not all mindless automata. There are other people who are like him. But he has to struggle with the fact that his lifespan is very limited. And it's just such an amazing exploration of existential ideas with him, and how he has to struggle with what it means to be alive, if he really could be considered to be alive. It's just really fascinating. Like, Vivi doesn't have any expressions. He doesn't have a face, you know? And they're able to just cram so much emotion into him, just with that blank, you know, black, you know, just with the glowing eyes, and it just is completely, you know exactly what he's feeling, and it's amazing. And then there's Eiko. I really enjoy her. Your mileage may vary about how you feel about the bratty kid character, and she can get a little bit over the top. And I have a hard time not getting a little bit eye-rolly about the little girl character who always talks about, oh, I am such a lady, you know. But she's this orphan kid who lives on a different continent, lives with a bunch of Mughals, you know. She's a summoner, has a horn. She, you know, is very lonely and develops a crush on Zidane almost immediately. And it's just so, like, effervescent and outgoing that it's almost impossible not to. I guess a lot of people find her annoying, but I think she's a lot of fun. You know, again, she can be too much on occasion, but I think they really sort of captured the ability to do a sort of little girl who acts like an adult without making it be too either cloying or annoying. It's just kind of funny to see her, you know, awkwardly flirt with Zidane or have this weird sort of, you know, one-sided rivalry with Dagger over him. It's I don't know. It's charming in a way, you know. I think the sad thing is that the rest of the cast doesn't really measure up to those like the original 4 characters in Eiko are really, those are the only ones you really see in full motion video on a regular basis, you know. And it's like Freya shows up in one FMV until the final one at the end, and it's like Quina and Amarant, or Salamander, whatever you want to call him. They both only show up in FMVs at the very end of the game because they're just not that focused on. And Quina's okay as a sort of comic relief, I want to eat everything character with that, but it doesn't really need that much depth. But Freya and Amarant especially really get the shaft here. Freya is introduced with a lot of, you know, a lot of things that are interesting about her, and you think it's going to go somewhere, but it's like her thing is that she, the love of her life, Sir Fratley, has gone off and hasn't been seen in years, and then he finally shows up again at, like, the beginning of Disc 2, and he has amnesia, and that's the end of that plot. And from that point on, she pretty much does nothing at all. And Amarant's just like a really one note. He's like a bounty hunter who's sent out by the Queen to get Princess Garnet back, and he has a grudge against Zidane because pretty much his shtick is that he likes to pick fights with people, and Zidane outsmarted him once, and it's always and ended up getting him arrested because of it. And so his thing is that I don't understand friendship and teamwork, and I don't get it, and that's pretty much his only thing. And eventually it sort of has a resolution in Disc 3, but it's, you know, when they go to Ibsen's castle and he, you know, finds out that he can't do it all alone, but it's so minor, you know, and that's a shame to me, because I think the characters who are fleshed out are some of the best characters in the franchise, so the fact that there's still a few that just sort of are like, you know, is really disappointing to me. But then you get back to Zidane himself, because you knew it couldn't be as easy as all that. He's got to have, you know, some deep, dark, Cloud Strife-esque secret, and he does. But it really fits. It really fits in a way, because you find out towards the end of the game that the main villain, Kuja, and first, let me say, I like Kuja. I like Kuja a lot. I remember everybody complaining about him when that game came out, because he was, you know, because he was very, you know, effeminate and sort of slimy, you know. And obviously, I'd be the last person to say somebody shouldn't be effeminate, and that's, you know, it's really a shallow criticism, I think. But he's very manipulative, and he's the one who's creating these black mages and selling them to the Queen and starting all these wars. And I think he's a great villain, and I don't care what anybody says, he rocks that thong. Like, everybody should rock thongs as well as Kuja does. There should be more thong usage in the world, I'm just saying. So Kuja's fantastic as a villain. He's not, I don't think he's my favorite villain in the world. He sort of feels like a weird cross between Kefka and Sephiroth, with a little bit of androgyny mixed in. Or a little bit more androgyny mixed in, I should say. It feels like they're sort of going for that sort of happy revelry and doing evil that Kefka had, mixed with a sort of Bishonen pretty boy with a troubled past, and a deep dark secret that makes him go crazy kind of thing, like Sephiroth does. So I'm not going to say he's my favorite because I feel like putting Kefka and Sephiroth in a blender is effective, but it's not the most original thing in the world. But I don't mind my megalomaniacal villains having being over dramatic. That's fine. But it turns out that both Zidane and Kefka, both Zidane and Kuja are from another planet, and that planet has been trying to assimilate their planet for a very long time. And Kuja was supposed to be the angel of death who would come down and disrupt the cycle of souls, which also feels kind of like Final Fantasy VII. And Zidane was supposed to be his replacement, and Kuja got jealous and dropped him onto the Earth, and he didn't know what happened, and that's all she wrote. But so when they eventually go to Terra, and they find a whole bunch of identical Zidane copies all over the place, Zidane realizes that he is basically a black mage, like Vivi. They're the same in a way. Garland created the genomes for a specific purpose to be interchangeable vessels, and then Kuja, almost like playing with dolls, watching his parent do the same thing, made his own type of genome to sort of assert his own independence and individuality. So Kuja very much has that same sort of internal struggle that the rest of the characters do. We find out, but that's finally when Zidane kind of breaks. It's easy for him to tell Vivi to buck up and teach him how to be a person, but when it happens to him, he's understandably pretty screwed up by it. And but it works because he's spent the entire game building all these other people up and teaching them to assert themselves. It's a little bit sappy, but it's nice when all of his friends show up and do the same for him. It really has come full circle. I love these characters so incredibly much. So by the time I got to this game to actually play it for real and not just play the opening, it was already the summer of 2002. I think around June or so. So, although, given the fact that it's taken me 3 years to get from Final Fantasy VIII through Final Fantasy IX, about 6 months to get through Final Fantasies V and VI doesn't seem all that bad. But yeah, I definitely had the game for a while, and that was the summer between 10th grade and 11th grade. And I have so many fond memories of that particular summer. It was the summer that I got my driver's license. It was the summer that I really started being feeling like a real teenager, hanging out with friends and getting crushes on girls and having those kinds of that teen drama, all that stuff happening, and all the wonderful, cringe-worthy things of being a teenager at that point. And that was Final Fantasy IX I was playing throughout that. It was just right in that perfect moment where you still kind of feel like a kid, like you're on summer vacation. I didn't get a job until later that year. My first job. So still just summer vacation was waking up every morning. Mom goes to work, and I'm just in the house by myself playing video games and watching American Gladiators, and it was just it was like the last summer that was like that, but just mixed in with all this sort of new, more grown-up stuff as well, and this sense of independence, and I can, drive myself around, and I have all these cool teenage friends, and so it was a very, very exciting time, and it's hard to believe that was more than half my lifetime ago at this point. But I was so excited by this game that I recorded it. I took 2 8-hour-long VHS tapes in EP mode, and I recorded every story-related section of this game onto VHS tapes. I still have them. I still have them to this day. It's the first... I've recorded like sections of games before when I realized I could do that with a VCR, but I never just recorded an entire game before. And I ended up going back, once I got Final Fantasies 7 and 8 on PlayStation as opposed to PC, I recorded those games as well. But 9 was the first time I ever did that, and it was it'd be fun to go back and just watch the game, So that was a lot of fun too. And then also that summer I had my wisdom teeth taken out while I was playing this game. Not at the exact time I was playing this game. They didn't like break into my house and like yank teeth out of me while I was trying to, you know, finish disc 2 or something. I'm pretty sure I was on disc 2 at the time though. But yeah, I had the surgery. It's like the most extensive surgery I've ever had, even to this day. I've never really had any other surgeries besides that. But it was... I had a lot of fun having my wisdom teeth taken out. I've never really had an experience like that before, where just... I remember just being in the chair and they just hooked up the IV to me and they asked me what my favorite food was. And that's the last thing I remember. You know, I said pizza, and then all of a sudden it was over. You know, it was there wasn't any kind of drowsiness or any kind of, you know, drifting off to sleep or wondering, oh, wow, I'm starting to feel kind of woozy. It was just completely awake, and all of a sudden I'm in a wheelchair and the whole thing's over. And I'm just going, where are my teeth? I want my teeth, because I like requested beforehand to make sure my teeth were returned to me. I was an embarrassing mess that day, but I don't really have a lot of vices. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, but that medication made me very happy. I'm not going to lie. I was just like on top of the world the rest of the day, you know. And while the following days were really painful in a lot of ways, having to recover from that, I certainly recall doing a lot of Final Fantasy IX playing as I was convalescing from my surgery. So this game ties into a lot of really important memories in my life. And then there's this thing. So I mentioned in the Final Fantasy VIII videos that one of the things that first got me interested in getting the game, getting Final Fantasy VIII, was seeing the strategy guide. This huge, giant tome of a book, you know? I'd never seen a strategy guide that big before. I'd never seen character models that looked like that before. It blew my mind. And that was, you know, so when I finally saw the game for PC, I was like, I gotta get this. You know, as I'd seen that strategy guide. I'm glad it was that game, because Final Fantasy IX strategy guide would not have had the same impact on me. I still got it. It's this guy right here. And it's, you know, it doesn't, I mean, the cover art's not that bad. It looks great. I like the character designs and all that stuff. You might be thinking, oh, geez, this is in terrible shape. Look at all the pages that have come out of the binding. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. See, the thing with this strategy guide, you can see it on here, it says, enhanced by Play Online. That basically meant, buy this book. It won't tell you anything all that important, but it will give you codes to go to this website, and there you can find the real strategy guide. So I have all of these printouts from 2002, June 1st, 2002 right here, with various bits of strategy that the book didn't really feel like including. And it is, they have been raked over the coals for this, and rightly so, because this is insulting, you know? This is a terrible strategy guide, I'm not going to lie. It is a terrible strategy. Like, I have just tons and tons of printouts here of stuff that should be in the guide, but it's not. But it was really prescient, I guess you could say, because it really did predict that 20 years from then, people would not be buying strategy guides, but would just be going online and looking up the answers to their problems that way. But in this case, they charged you $13 for it. Oh my God! Look. It's just tons and tons of these. June 6th, 2002. Yeah, so it would just say something like, "Oh, there's a hidden item in this town. Want to find out what it is and where it is? Go to Play Online." And you have to print out this thing and tell you where. Oh, here's where the hidden Stellatio coin is. And it's like, good Lord, what is even the point? So it was a terrible experiment, and Play Online eventually became the hub for Final Fantasy XI, but it really did not do a lot of good here. It was just kind of infuriating, honestly. So despite what I said before about the game staying fresh, after Disc 2, things start getting a little bit muddied, which is sort of keeping with a lot of other Final Fantasies, especially 8, I think. Because all that sort of spontaneity just kind of dies. And I get why, because they really, especially in a game that's structured like this one, with the characters who have specific abilities, you want to spend as much time with them as possible so you can build them up. And now that I'm more focused on the gameplay than the story, having played a lot of the earlier Final Fantasies, where the goal really was to build, assemble your own party and and build them up the right way. The fact that you are missing a lot of members of your party for a very long time in discs 1 and 2 sort of hampers both your ability to strategize on your own without having certain people forced into your party, and also once you reunite in disc 3, there are a few members like Steiner who you haven't used in a very long time and who are completely underleveled. So there is certainly a logic to wanting to get the gang together and say, okay, that's enough. That's enough with the temporary party members. Let's just get these things focused and let you get to the whole role-playing, party-building part of the game. So I get that, but story-wise, it's just this huge sort of drop-off from everything feeling really natural to everything feeling really sort of contrived in that sense, and everything feeling sort of dictated by the gameplay. Because suddenly it's like, certain characters had made sense being part of the group. Like obviously, Zidane put all this stuff together. Garnet is the princess. Steiner is her knight. Vivi's involved with the black mage stuff. Even Freya, to an extent, is an important person in Burmecia. So there's some status there. But it's like, suddenly you're in Disc 3 and you're having meetings in Regent Sid's official private chambers, and it's like, who invited the 6-year-old kid, Like, why is she there? And it's like, why is the annoying bounty hunter invited to the meeting? Like, he's a criminal, And why is this weird guy with the giant tongue who eats everything, why is he invited to important strategy meetings? Yet the members of Tantalus have to just run errands for them. It seems really, really unnatural all of a sudden that all of this is happening. Even later on, you get a boat. You get a boat, and Regent Sid comes along with you, and he brings Blank along too, but just to pilot the ship. And so it's like you can't use him in battle anymore. You can't even ask him. He's just there to drive the boat. And then there's a point where Kuja kidnaps your entire party and puts them into cells. He takes your entire playable party, and he takes Sid, the frog. He takes the frog. But I guess he just leaves Blank on the boat. I guess he's never even mentioned. He's not kidnapped. He's not put in these cells. I'm really getting tired of motorcycles driving by when I'm trying to record. I guess he's just hanging out on the boat. It's never even brought up what he's doing during any of this. He's just hanging out, I guess. So it starts to feel really kind of cheap in that way. Whereas everything used to just be, pick up your sword and come with us, and once our goals no longer align, you can go your own way. Now it just sort of feels like, oh, the game said these are the 8 main characters. So that's who we're going to take with us. It's such a huge departure from what had come before. And speaking of the weird conference room scenes, I never even really noticed this before, or maybe I'd forgotten, but the stupidest moment in the game, I think, comes in Disc 3, where it really stops feeling natural. It goes back to one of those Regent Sid, meetings. But suddenly Dagger's not there. She'd been having problems ever since the end of Disc 2, or since the beginning of Disc 3 when Alexandria is destroyed. She loses her voice, and that affects her in battle because she can't cast. Sometimes she won't take action anymore. It's sort of like Ness being homesick in Mother 2 / Earthbound. And so they all come back from that mission, and suddenly, the princess is missing. And Steiner's like, don't worry, I'll go out and find her. And it shows a few scenes of him running around the city trying to find her, and then he comes back and goes, I can't believe it, this is terrible. The princess is nowhere in the city. Do you guys know how big a city is? Lindblum's supposed to be this huge, giant place, with all these different districts you have to take. You can't even walk to the various districts. You have to take air cars to them because the place is so giant, And so Steiner, this one guy, in a span of about 10 minutes, can confidently say, I have searched every single square inch of this city, and I can safely say she does not exist. It is the stupidest thing. I couldn't even go to a small town of 1,000 people, a tiny, barely incorporated town, and say with certainty, one person I'm looking for is or is not there. So the fact that Steiner can just go, oh yeah, she's not there, is insane. And so then they're like, okay, we'll adjourn this meeting. There's only one place she could be, Alexandria. Really? Really? How did the princess, the soon-to-be queen, manage to just, how did she get by herself, from one kingdom to a totally different kingdom? It doesn't make any sense. Like, did she hire an airship? Did nobody recognize her? She got there within, before anybody even noticed that she was gone. She managed to go from one country to another. And they're like, so they all fan out there, like, oh, we can't find her. She's nowhere in Alexandria either. How is that possible? And it's only Zidane who figures out that, oh my god, okay, I know the one place in the castle she has to be, and obviously he's right. And it goes to this great scene where it's a really common trope in fiction, where the character comes to, especially a female character, because females tend to have long hair, comes to a very important decision in her life, and so she cuts off her hair. And that's a really good scene. I think that sort of overshadowed the fact that everything preceding it was just so incredibly stupid. Unbelievably stupid. Alright, so obviously I haven't talked about the gameplay yet, and that's a relatively important part. I really like the way this game is structured in terms of how it's played. I don't know if I'd call it my favorite system, because I really did enjoy going back to those early games, the first three, and really diving into the meat of those. And as I said in those earlier videos, it's given me a better appreciation for the systems of those games. When I was growing up, I always focus a bit more on the story. But this one's definitely up there. It's not the most involving in the world, but I don't really like mine to be too complicated. Just let me do what I need to do. I really like, because compared to 7 and 8, it's a lot simpler, and I like that. Most of the changes implemented in 8 are gone, so magic points are back, experience points work the normal way. All you gotta do is level up your characters. You don't have to worry about junctioning magic spells to things, which I don't have a problem with now that I understand it, but remember, the first time I played through Final Fantasy VIII, I had no idea what I was doing, and I never figured it out. I had to start the game over from Disc 4 because I couldn't beat it. But in Final Fantasy IX, we're back to characters who have set classes, so that not everybody is a complete blank slate. They all have, Zidane is a thief, and Steiner's a knight, and Dagger's a white mage, Vivi's a black mage, stuff like that. So they all have equipment they can equip based on that, and that's where the real system of the game comes in, is through equipment. And I've heard people compare it to like Final Fantasy VII's Materia, but I think it's a lot closer to Final Fantasy VI's Esper and Magicite system. Because basically, every piece of equipment that you put on can teach different skills. And it can teach different skills to different people. So it might teach a magic spell to one of your mages, but it might teach a different kind of skill to somebody else. And the ability points you get in battle build up to learning that. But unlike in Final Fantasy VI, where you had to get up to 100% to even use the thing you were going to learn, as soon as you equip the item, you can use that skill. But if you don't master it, then once you take that item off, you can't use it anymore, even if you've gotten most of the ability points for it. So I find there's a lot more utility there. There's a lot more, it's a lot more open as to whether or not you want to just diligently learn every skill, or if there's certain skills you just want to go, I need it for this battle, but I'm never going to need it again, and I'd rather learn something else, so I'm going to just put this hat on, or put this armor on, and use it for this one battle, and then throw it away. So I find that a lot of fun, and there are also two different types of abilities. You have like battle use abilities, certain skills that can be actively used, like magic spells or other certain command actions that characters have. But they're also equipable abilities. Each of your characters has a certain set of little crystals, and those number of crystals grow as your level grows, and each of these ability skills costs a certain number, so you can mix and match them. But those are all kinds of, like, you have various status defenses, like you can equip antibody, and you're automatically guarded from poison forever. It costs four of those crystal points. And then there are like, you have half MP you can equip, and that's like 12 points. You have auto haste and auto life, auto potion, auto regen, stuff like that. As well as certain character class traits like cover or counter, things like that. Basically things you wouldn't be able to select from a menu in battle, but they're just innate abilities you have to equip, and you have to sort of decide what is best. I always tend to keep level up and ability up equipped on me, just so I can speed through without having to grind as much. Something I always hear people complain about for this game was how slow the battle system was. And it's not something I ever really noticed until someone pointed it out to me, until I read about it. Of course, that's probably because I was terrible at Final Fantasy VIII and, just summoned Guardian forces over and over again and sat through those attack animations repeatedly. So anything compared to that seemed like a short battle. But now that I've gotten used to other Final Fantasy games and put them all together, and I've heard that criticism, I can see, yes, this game runs really, really. It chugs. It just chugs. Just like all the other games, I sort of followed along with H.C. Bailey's walkthrough on YouTube with this, or followed after. Like, I'd play the game and then follow after. So I'd be able to find out certain strategies. So there's this really terrible boss, this hidden boss, this book you can find in Alexandria Castle, that it's sort of reminiscent of a boss in Final Fantasy V, or actually just a regular enemy, I think. We had to open the book to a certain page by doing a certain amount of damage. Otherwise, if the book is closed, it'll just completely destroy you. So because of his strategy of putting Steiner's minus strike on, which allows him to do the amount of damage that's the difference between his current HP and his total HP, to get to the right page every time, and I was able to use certain strategies to beat him really early in the game, so I could get the running shoes, which teaches auto haste, and that's a skill I tried to get every single person to learn and always had on. Even so, it always sort of... The game still was pretty slow in terms of battling, but it wasn't something that really bothered me all that much. In some ways, it was kind of nice, because, especially once you got auto-regen on, it was good to use attacks with long animations and long recharge times, because then you'd just be rebuilding HP and nothing else would be happening. But if you got Doom cast on you, and you see that little timer over your head ticking down to 0 before you die, and everybody's just standing around doing nothing, it becomes really frustrating. So I can see why that's a problem. People also complain about the trance system, because unlike other games, if you go, when your meter builds up and you go into trance, you have 3 different turns to use your move. So gives you a bit more time than, say, Final Fantasy VII, where you just have that one move and then it starts over. You get 3 chances here, which is nice. But it'll inevitably happen that a character will go into trance right as an enemy dies. And trance always ends at the end of a battle, no matter how much of it has been used. So there will be so many times you've built up your meter and then you lose it without having had a chance to use it a single time. That's frustrating, but it's never really bothered me all that much. There's a card game in this one, like in Final Fantasy VIII. It sucks. Triple Triad was always fun. Some of the rules could get a little bit confusing, but I've never been able to figure out this game. And it's never been interesting enough for me to bother trying to put the effort in to learn it. There's all these 4 different numbers and letters, and it does serves for magic and physical attack and little arrows, and I just couldn't. And plus, there are other numbers that show up on the card when you actually do battle a different card. And I don't think I even got. I don't think I got any footage of the card game because I just didn't care. There's one time where you have to play it to progress through the game. Other than that, I never touched it. There's a secret in the final dungeon of the game. There are hidden points you can access. You can battle the ghosts of card games past. I didn't bother with that crap. I didn't bother with a lot of the side quests. I did the Chocobo stuff. There's a game called Chocobo Hot and Cold, which I think is a lot better than Chocobo Breeding in 7 and the Choco Whistle stuff, whatever it was called in Final Fantasy VIII. It's pretty brainless. It's just basically it's a hot and cold game. It's like Marco Polo. You dig in a certain area and your Chocobo gives you clues if you're close to a treasure, basically. And you got to keep doing that over and over and over. I probably spent many hours in that, and I don't even know why I did it again this time. But I didn't bother with the with any of the super bosses this time. I did that twice. I've done it twice in my life. I have no desire to go through that crap again. So I did what was necessary. Okay, so I did play this game again when I was in college, like a lot of the other Final Fantasy games I've mentioned. And I don't really have that many memories of it. The only thing I really distinctly remember, I feel it was a pretty similar run to my first one, but I also have a lot of specific memories of my life tied to it. The only thing I remember was trying to grind, and I didn't really do any grinding this time, except for one exception we'll get to in a minute. I didn't do much grind. I was grinding then during my college playthrough, my college apartment, and just going to like this really dangerous spot with some kind of zombie dragon or something and getting my butt kicked constantly. And I just remember sort of raging for a little bit. And I'm always embarrassed to admit when I rage in a game, but it happens. But unfortunately, it happened in my college apartment. So it's like at one point my my roommate comes out of his room and goes, "My mom wants to know why you're yelling out here." I'm on the phone with her, and she can hear you yelling through the phone. That was embarrassing. So there was that in that run through. I'm amazed I managed to make it through as many Final Fantasy games as I did when I was in college. I probably should have been focusing on other things, but whatever. So now, in this run through, the one grinding thing that I did was also something I learned from H.C. Bailey. Again, I've played through these games before. I've done my time. I've suffered, So I might as well make this easy for me. So there was this strategy taught where you can use Quina, who's your blue mage, learn a skill called Limit Glove, which does like max damage, I think, if your HP is 1. And when you're in Burmecia, you can climb up through these vines and get to this, Argizmaluke's Grotto, I guess I should say, where there are these really tough dragons, the Grand Dragons. And if you're lucky, you can get Quina to do this spell and do max damage to the Grand Dragon and then defeat it. And then have Quina eat it, and you'll gain tons and tons of experience points. So he just did it to show it off, and then reverted it so it wouldn't be over leveled. I was like, I want to try this. I've never done this before. I've earned the right to do this. So I did. I gained from I think like level 13 to like level 28, something ridiculous. I gained like 15 levels. I think it was 13 to 28, something like that. And it made the next few sections of the game really, really easy for Zidane, Freya, Vivi, and Quina. It just meant they didn't gain levels for a long time after that. But it was really weird to go back to Disc 2 when the game switches back over to Dagger and Steiner, and they're stuck at level 7, So it really enhanced the gulf in the levels, but I don't regret having done it. I'm glad I did it. Okay, so now I finally have to fess up and talk about this latest playthrough, because there is just no good excuse for taking nearly 3 years to complete a single game. I was looking back at my older Final Fantasy Memories videos, and I put out like Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy 1, and Final Fantasy 2 all within like a month of each other. And since then, it's taken me mostly like a few months to finish each game, really. Sometimes I would have a moment like in between certain games where I just sort of get burned out on Final Fantasy, and there'd be a longer gap between those, and then once I get back into it, I just sort of zoom through them fairly well. But this one, like I finished Final Fantasy VIII sometime in the summer of 2017. I started playing Final Fantasy IX. My earliest recordings for this are June of 2017. June of 2017. I was doing okay for a while. I finished Disc 1 in November, which that's still pretty far off. That's about 5 months. And then I have like recordings from the beginning of Disc 2 in February of 2018. And then I just totally stopped playing until October of last year. So for about a year and 8 months, I just did not even touch the game at all. And I have no excuse for that. Since then, I started like around early Disc 2, like right when you get control of Zidane and his party again, they go to Clara. I started that last October, and I've made it through the rest of the game in the following, how many months is that? 6 months since then? So I played the bulk of the game through the course of about 6 months. I finished Disc 2 by December. I started Disc 3 in January. And then pretty much everything from Ibsen's Castle until the end of the game I did within the past week. So once I finally got back into it and really focused on it, It didn't go that badly. I mean, it's not like I'm really bad at the game. I logged about 45 hours total. That's about it. But I'm not like as devoted to video games. Don't have this kind of free time I used to. Obviously, up until all this quarantine stuff happened, I had a job, and then I was working on my channel. But even then, I just was playing other games. I finished a lot of games during the time I should have been playing Final Fantasy IX. I did a run through of Majora's Mask, and that took over a year in and of itself. I beat all three Mother games, Mother 2 / Earthbound, Mother 3. Put a lot of time into Mario Kart 8. I got a Wii U since then. I got a Switch since then. I played Mario Odyssey, but I haven't beaten it. Played a lot of the Beatles Rock Band. I finally, after about 10 years, beat the original Super Mario Bros. 2, the Japanese version. I just got done cleaning my NES, and I played through all three of SMB, SMB2, SMB3. So I really don't know what to say about this. And also Super Mario RPG, obviously, I did a lot of work on that as well in the intervening time. Although I can't really say that was any better because it took me almost 3 years to finish that game. So about as long as it took for this one. It seems like it was almost 4 years, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'll admit to you right here. The last episode of Mario RPG I actually recorded about a year ago, exactly a year ago from right when I'm recording this. So I'd had like most of the episodes recorded. I just didn't actually have them ready to be put out. I just put them out slowly over the course of the year whenever I needed a video out. So I don't really know what it is. And it really sort of made me go back and question whether this game was really as good as I always remembered it being. If I had that difficult of a time actually going back and playing it, you know. But when I was into it, I was really into it. In a general sense, I'm just having a harder time devoting myself to really long video games. So I think that's part of it. Also, I think it was just a pain in the butt having to hook up my recording software every time. For some reason, my PlayStation 2 really does not like it. It always wants to screw up the screen. I have to try several times of unplugging the USB and plugging it back into my computer to get it to go. My Super Nintendo, when I record Mario RPG, first try every time. But all these Final Fantasy games, it just does not want to cooperate. So I think it's just sort of, I don't know if I call it my changing tastes in games, but it's just like my changing lack of time, where I would just sort of, if I'd have a video game fix, it'd be something I could just sort of hop on and play for like about 20 minutes and not really have to be too invested in. So it's like I'd leave, so like the longer I'd left Final Fantasy IX, the more I would be reluctant to go back to it, because it's the RPG curse, where it's like you leave something for a while and you come back and you're like, what was I doing, you know? Even if you know the story, it's like, what was I having my characters learn? What equipment have I used? What do I need to do to get back into the swing of things? And so I always felt like I'd spend like 20 minutes, you know, the time I would normally spend just playing a game, just sort of getting back into the scheme of things, you know. So once I actually got into a decent routine of it, so I wouldn't, you know, feel like so isolated and lost, it was fine, and it went by pretty quickly. So hopefully I'll never go that long again. Take that long devoted to a single game. That's just that's just ridiculous to me, and I'm so embarrassed that I sort of just had that sitting on my back burner for so long. But I guess that's just the way I do things, isn't it? I'm embarrassed. So that is Final Fantasy IX. I still think it's probably one of the best Final Fantasy games. It's the last one that the creator Sakaguchi Hironobu worked extensively on, and I believe he said it was his favorite Final Fantasy game. So you know, how can you argue with that, right? It is kind of a nostalgia trip, and it feels much more so that way now that I've played through all the games in sequence prior to this. It's not blatantly fan servicey. It just feels like a good summation of everything. Like it's not that interested in pushing forward to the next big thing. It's more interested in taking what's come before and polishing it to a wonderful shine. And so rather than having all these experimental things, it's everything that worked before, and it's coming together to make a really good game. So that is Final Fantasy IX for me. I'm going to go ahead and do all the usual stuffage here. You know, please like, comment, subscribe if you're not subscribed. I got the Dragon Ball dissection stuff going on. Other lots of new projects in the works right now, so stay tuned for that. Please donate to my Patreon if you can. You see all the you see my patrons being scrolled by right now. Thanks to all those guys. Thank you so much. Hopefully I placed it above me. That'd be awkward if I didn't. So yes, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.